Have you ever felt that on your spiritual journey, instead of progressing, you're stuck? Have you wondered if you might be making some mistake without realizing it? In this video, I will reveal the 10 most common mistakes that any of us can make when walking the path toward enlightenment. Mistakes that, instead of bringing us closer to inner peace, drive us further away from it. So, stay until the end, because recognizing these mistakes and correcting them may be the key to taking your spiritual practice to a deeper and more authentic level. Let's begin. But first, subscribe, give it a like, and share. For many years, I lived believing that sacrifice was a virtue, that by setting aside my own desires and needs for the well-being of others, I was doing the right thing. I was taught from a young age that sacrificing for others, especially for family, was a noble act, a sign of love. But over time, I began to notice something strange within me, something I couldn't understand at first. I started to feel resentment, a sense of discomfort and pressure that suffocated me every time I forced myself to give up who I was in the name of love. How could it be that something supposedly so pure and selfless weighed so heavily on me? That's when I understood a profound truth. Sacrifice that doesn't come from genuine love, done out of obligation or to meet external expectations, only breeds resentment. Every time I said yes when I truly wanted to say no, I distanced myself a little more from who I really was. Sacrifice, when not done from the heart, becomes a burden that sooner or later explodes in the form of anger, frustration, or even guilt. I remember when I used to carry a small amulet in which I placed all my faith. It was a small cross that always hung from my neck, and whenever I felt fear or insecurity, I would clutch it tightly, believing that this simple object held the protection I needed. I held on so strongly to that belief that when one day I lost it, I felt an immense emptiness, as if something important was missing, as if I had been left unprotected. It was in that moment of anguish that I realized how much I had limited the presence of the divine to a physical object. I had placed all my trust in something external, forgetting that true protection, true power, doesn't come from an amulet, an image, or a crystal, but from what I carry inside, the divine spark that resides within me. When I began my spiritual path, one of the first things I learned was that I needed to control my negative emotions. I thought that feeling anger, fear, or sadness was wrong, that if I really wanted to progress spiritually, I had to eliminate those emotions from my life. So I became an expert in repressing them, pretending everything was fine, even when there was a storm raging inside me. But over time, that repression began to take a toll. The anger I held onto turned into resentment, into self-criticism and criticism of others. The sadness I refused to express became a constant weight, an emptiness I didn't know how to fill. It was then that I realized repressing my emotions wasn't the solution. Being on the spiritual path doesn't mean you stop feeling. For a long time, I thought the best way to protect myself from the chaos around me was to create a barrier, an invisible shield that would separate me from the world. For a long time, I thought the best way to protect myself from the chaos around me was to create a barrier, an invisible shield that would separate me from the world. As if a bubble of light, of protection, could keep me safe from the dangers I saw around me. I firmly believed I needed that external protection, that there was something outside of me that could harm me, hurt me, or negatively influence my life. But over time, I realized that by wrapping myself in that bubble, I wasn't just feeding the fear of the external. I was also reinforcing the belief that something outside of me could hold more power than my own being. I was strengthening the idea that I needed to be defensive, always ready to fight against something that in reality only existed in my mind. As I learned spiritual teachings, I realized that everything around me is part of God, of that divine essence that resides in every corner of the universe. For a long time, I sought answers from others, from people who seemed to have reached a level of wisdom I longed for. I let myself be guided, trusted their words, followed their advice to the letter, believing that only through them could I find the right path. But every time I did, something inside me didn't feel quite right. Sometimes I ended up disappointed, other times confused, because no matter how much I tried to follow in their footsteps, I couldn't feel complete. That's when I understood that the true guidance doesn't come from outside but from within. My intuition, that soft voice that's always there, had been silenced so many times in favor of external guidance that I had forgotten how to listen to it. On my spiritual journey, I often fell into the trap of idealizing those I considered to be masters. I saw them as perfect beings, far along the path, people who had overcome all the trials life had thrown at them. I thought that they, with their knowledge and experience, were on a higher level than me, and that if I could follow their teachings, I too could reach that place of wisdom and peace. But over time, I realized that idealizing these teachers not only fed my ego, but also distanced me from the real lesson. Spiritual teachers are not always people who have reached perfection, but are rather those who test us, who challenge us in everyday life. Sometimes the true teachers present themselves in the form of friends, enemies, family members, or situations that complicate our lives. I have repeated so many affirmations in my life, convinced that just by saying the right words, everything would change. I would look at myself in the mirror, tell myself I was strong, that I was capable, that everything would be fine. But over time, I realized that those words, no matter how beautiful they were, didn't have the power I expected. Saying an affirmation without feeling it is like writing a message in the sand. It gets erased by the first wave that comes along. It doesn't matter how many times I repeat I am safe if deep within me, I still feel fear. That affirmation holds no power. Words alone aren't magical. The real power is in what I feel, in what my heart truly believes. Only when an affirmation aligns with an emotion, with a deeply rooted belief within my being, does it begin to take shape in my reality. In the past, I found myself more than once wanting to help someone without being asked. I believed that by sending light or energy to a person going through a difficult situation, I was doing something good, something noble. I wanted them to improve, to heal, for their problems to be solved. However, over time I learned that this way of acting, though well-intentioned, can be a subtle form of manipulation. We don't always know what someone else needs. We can't fully understand the challenges they're going through. Every situation, no matter how painful or difficult it seems from the outside, has a purpose in that person's life, a value that we often can't see. It's very easy to fall into the trap of worrying about other people's problems, especially when they're close to us, family or friends we love deeply. When someone dear goes through an illness or a crisis, the first impulse is to feel distressed, to share their pain. Somehow we believe that by suffering alongside them, we're being more supportive, more empathetic. However, over time I've come to understand that this anguish not only doesn't help, but it also strengthens the power of the illness or problem that person is facing. By worrying, I'm giving more strength to the situation. I'm affirming that the problem is bigger than the solution, more powerful than the divine love that is always present. I remember the moment when I began to explore the world of spirituality, when I discovered teachings that seemed to open doors to special knowledge, a wisdom not everyone had. I felt privileged, as if I had been chosen by God to receive that information, to be in the right place to grow in ways that others couldn't. I thought that the people around me wouldn't understand what I was learning, that they weren't ready to receive those teachings as I was. It was a feeling of being special, of being more spiritually advanced than others. But over time, I realized that this feeling of privilege was just an ego trap. And with that, we've come to the end of the video. I hope this reflection on the 10 mistakes in the spiritual path has helped you identify potential blockages and inspires you to continue moving forward with more awareness and authenticity. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe, and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next one.